Hi everyone, here's the Bookchemist once again. Today I'm reviewing The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. I knew Patrick Rothfuss because I am a big Dungeons & Dragons fan. Strangely enough, I never played the game much in the course of my life. I only played it for a few years when I was in middle school, but it had such a strong impact on my life. I think I'm still reeling from it a little bit. I remember reading the Dungeon Master's Guide the first time and reading that passage about the fact that if you want, you can change the rules of the game and change everything that comes with it, these narrative worlds, these fantastical creations, whatever way you want. I remember it blew my tiny mind away, this idea that you can play with the structures of narrative and of world building and with the rules of what at the end of the day is a language game. It's a game of communication between people whatever way you want, with the full anarchy of it all, that I was just hooked, I was just captivated. Patrick Rothfuss is the star of a D&D show called Acquisitions Incorporated. Even if you're not a D&D fan, but you're into nerd culture, I highly recommend it because it's hilarious. The guys are so fun, and I always have a great time watching these 2-hour episodes of friends playing Dungeons and Dragons together. And because I was such a fan of the show, I decided to look into the books the guy actually writes. And you know what? It's pretty good. And the most paradoxical thing about Name of the Wind is that it shouldn't be this good at all, because it's not even that it's a flawed book, it's that in many ways it shouldn't work. Name of the Wind doesn't really try to reinvent the wheel. It is set in a relatively canonical fantasy setting based on a European Middle Ages / early modern period of the mind that is translated to this secondary world, to this alternate world with different continents and different kingdoms and a different history. It features magic. Magic plays a major role in the book, but it doesn't go too heavy on the monsters and the elves, other races. There are no hell elves and dwarves and all those Tolkien-esque elements, and overall this allows the book to focus more extensively and to spend more time on the inner conflicts of the characters, and most notably of Kvothe. I'll call him Kvothe, the narrator of most of the novel and the protagonist of it. I'm on the fence over whether Kvothe qualifies as a great character or not, because on the one hand I must admit that he does have a little bit, he suffers from that chosen one syndrome that you find a lot in fantasy fiction and in fantastical stories of all sorts, where the main character is the chosen one in a way, is an incredibly talented, is a hero, is literally he's a hero. This is an entire book about the idea of how somebody becomes a hero, which on the one hand is fine because it's part of the fantasy genre that the protagonist needs to be pretty awesome in order to go through all the difficult things that come their way. But on the other hand, it also makes for poor character building if your protagonist is not flawed, if they're always awesome, if they're amazing, if they have good, strong morals and they overcome all challenges and they go through all sorts of experiences that people do not really experience in their lives except in their escapist fantasies. I'm not judging, I'm not passing judgment on any of that, I'm just commenting on it. But at the same time as Kvothe suffers a bit from that syndrome and is constantly and endlessly awesome across the novel, his psychological portrayal, his characterization also features quite a few interesting and true-to-life passages. For instance, the portrayal of trauma and the dynamics of trauma and the role it plays on Kvothe's life is actually brilliant and very believable. You follow this character acting in sometimes surprising, sometimes inexplicable ways, and you don't quite understand why he would say do something stupid or take an unwise decision at some points in the narrative, except that you understand that he is just a kid at this stage and he is going through some unconceivable pain as he's experiencing terrible horrors that alter the way his mind works. The evolution of this character's mind in this sense is still played beautifully and creates this situation where Kvothe is completely unrelatable on the one hand, but also fascinating to follow and interesting. The main reason why I said that the book shouldn't work as it does is that it's not even clunky in terms of narrative, it's not even slow moving, but it still spends quite a few pages, quite a long time at the beginning to set a stage for the narrative that at the end of the day is kind of unnecessary. I think this book, even without considering that some of its chapters move a bit slowly, some of its narrative strands at this stage in the series, more on that in a second, do not seem that necessary to the general plot of the novel. Even excluding all that, I think any editor could have easily taken 150 pages of this thing, which is pretty long. It's a 600 plus page novel that took me a while to go through. The point is, you just don't care. The point with The Name of the Wind in general is that you don't care that it takes a long time to get started, you don't care that some of those chapters seem a bit superfluous, you don't care that some passages take a long time to be done, because it's just so beautifully narrated. Patrick Rothfuss' sentences are so crunchy that you can actually feel the breeze on your skin when the characters go through forests on a summer day, and you can really perceive how delicious the food is when they finally find some sustenance after going hungry for weeks. You really experience in your guts the awful things that happen to Kvothe at time and again in his life. He is so good at pulling the threads of the narrative so that in a strange magical way he always manages to have his main character, to have this Kvothe guy, overcome all difficulties that come his way, but somehow by doing that he gets tangled more and more in the web of his own defeat, and his enemies get more ruthless, and the stakes get higher, and the doom, which will eventually come for sure for the guy, feels more inevitable and more dreadful. And you get so hooked that you just have to go through it. I read The Name of the Wind. It took me a long time, but every time I had some spare moments, I would just open the book and read some more, even just reading a few paragraphs, because I just wanted to go on and to experience the story of this guy, which is literally all that good storytelling should do, all that good novels should be about. Add on top of that this book has quite a few things to say, especially in its final pages, about the role storytelling plays in our lives, about how we shape our conceptions of ourselves, our ideas about our identity through storytelling and through these masks we wear. Recently, in my review of The Code of the Woosters, I said that I enjoyed the style of it and that I appreciated the language. I loved this Baroque, witty, self-referential language so much that the novel could have been about anything at all and I still would have loved it. And kind of the same applies to The Name of the Wind, which reads nothing at all like Woodhouse. Name of the Wind employs a bit more variety in its narrative. Its style changes slightly according to the different moments in the novel. It's hilarious one moment, it's dead serious another. It imitates the high seriousness of epic poetry in certain historical passages, especially when it comes to creating the history of this fantasy world. But if you're the kind of reader who is looking sure for a beautifully written novel, but also for an engaging plot and for conclusion, and no spoilers ahead by the way, I'm not sure Name of the Wind is the book for you, or hear me out. I knew that Name of the Wind was the first installment in a series. What I didn't know, I'll admit it, is that the series isn't complete at the moment. The Wise Man's Fear is the follow-up to The Name of the Wind, but the third book in the trilogy isn't out yet and there's still no news on when exactly it should be out. If you're looking for closure, if you need closure in your life, one thing I should mention, and I can't avoid mentioning it, is that The Name of the Wind offers no closure whatsoever. Name of the Wind really feels like the first third of a longer book, rather than as a book in its own right. it really feels like there should have been like as many pages over here, and they just are missing from the novel. I am extremely cool with it. I think reading in the course of my studies quite a lot of postmodern novels whose narratives just go nowhere got me used to open-ended narratives, but other people might not be, and the open-endedness of the book is something I believe you should be aware of. For all I know, The Wise Man's Fear, which is the sequel you can already buy and read, might solve most of the narrative threads that are left in the air in the name of the wind. I totally intend to read The Wise Man's Fear. I don't think I'll be doing it anytime soon because it's a very long book. I think it's longer than Name of the Wind, and I have other stuff lined up to read. I think I'll be cool until the third volume in the series is out, and then I'll just finish the story of Kvothi's life. Let me know what you thought about The Name of the Wind in the comment section below, if it sounds like your kind of thing from my review, if you've read anything else by Patrick Rothfuss, or if you have any other contemporary fantasy writer that you think is in the same sort of style and that you think I should totally check out. And thank you as always for watching the review, guys, and bye guys!